Sean Patrick, Alexander the Great, the Macedonian who conquered the world. Dive into the fascinating life and achievements of Alexander the Great, as explored in Sean Patrick's captivating book. This summary provides a glimpse into the legendary conqueror's life, his complex relationship with his father, Philip II of Macedon, and the relentless drive that led him to become the ruler of an empire spanning 3 continents. Discover the tactics Alexander employed in his numerous military battles, the cities he conquered, and the strategic decisions he made on his quest for world domination. As you explore this engrossing tale, gain insights into Alexander's impact on history and the persistent influence of Hellenistic culture across vast regions.
Taming Alexander's ambitions. Born in the Greek state of Macedonia in 356 BC, Alexander grew up under the shadow of his father, Philip II. Early in his teenage years, Alexander tamed the untamable horse Persepolis, leaving his father astounded but also wary of his talents. This event marked the beginning of a strained relationship between father and son that would ultimately drive Alexander to seek out his father's approval and prove his greatness. At the early age of 13 in northern Greece, Alexander demonstrated his innate skills and intelligence in the presence of his legendary father, Philip II. When presented with the opportunity to acquire the reputedly untamable horse Persepolis for a steep price, young Alexander's determination shined. Understanding the horse's fear of its shadow, he led Persepolis into the sun and skillfully calmed and mounted it. This remarkable accomplishment astonished everyone, including his father, who declared that Macedonia was too small for his gifted son to rule. However, Philip's growing fear of Alexander's burgeoning talents and fame soon saw their relationship take an alarming turn. Realizing that his son had surpassed him in battle, Philip enacted a plan to control and punish Alexander, starting with divorcing his mother, Olympias. Despite the friction between them, Philip still invited Alexander to the wedding banquet, where everyone indulged in vast quantities of wine to honor tradition. Amid the feast, a drunken incident involving a toast to the newlyweds and a potential heir led Alexander to hurl his cup across the table in anger. Responding to the outburst, a drunk Philip stumbled and fell to the floor while attempting to confront Alexander. After this distressing altercation, Alexander and his mother retreated to the mountainous region of Epirus. Fortunately, relations between the father and son were eventually restored, allowing Alexander to embark on a journey that would see him exceed his father's expectations and stand out in the annals of history. Alexander's rise to power. Inheriting the Macedonian throne at a young age of 20, Alexander swiftly dealt with internal rebellions before embarking on his ambitious military campaign against Persia. He successfully quashed the Greek city of Thebes, instilling fear in other potential rebels. With his domestic affairs secure, Alexander led his vast army against Persia, demonstrating ingenious military strategy during his first major battle near Troy. Despite initial Persian success, he masterfully exploited the battleground and forced his adversaries to retreat, marking an initial victory on his path to international conquest. Unconventional victories of Alexander. Alexander wasted no time in conquering cities such as Sardis, Ephesus, and Miletus, strategically focusing on his broader plan. Miletus, a crucial Persian naval base, was taken after he chose to attack the city first instead of the approaching Persian navy. This decision led to a swift capture, leaving the Persian fleet without docking opportunities. After this conquest, Alexander surprisingly disbanded the Greek navy, avoiding direct conflict with the much stronger Persian navy. By conquering the eastern Mediterranean coastline, he deprived the Persians of docking locations. Not content with resting, Alexander tackled the harsh winter of 334 BC, continuing his string of triumphs. He conquered Telmessus using an unusual tactic, infiltrating the city with female dancers who assassinated the Persian garrison before he successfully took control. Dilemmas of Alexander's conquest. As Alexander marched through central Anatolia in 333 BC, he learned of Persian general Memnon's imminent invasion of southern Greece. Alexander faced a critical choice: conquer new lands or return home to protect his people. Meanwhile, the Persian king Darius had a decision of his own to make. With Memnon unexpectedly dead, would Darius invade Greece or face Alexander head-on? Ultimately, Darius retreated, but not before Alexander faced yet another challenge, illness and possible betrayal from his childhood friend and doctor, Philip. Alexander's resolve and trust won the day, enabling his conquest to continue. During Alexander's campaign, he received worrisome news: Persian general Memnon's fleet was threatening southern Greece. Greek hostility toward Macedonian rule meant that Persia might find a warm welcome in Greece, presenting a dilemma for Alexander. He had to choose between continuing his conquest or returning to defend his homeland. As Alexander pondered his decision, fate intervened. Memnon suddenly died on the Greek island of Lesbos. This created a new dilemma for Darius, the Persian king. With his most trusted general gone, Darius opted to call off the invasion and bring his troops home to confront Alexander directly. However, Alexander soon faced another challenge. As his army marched through southern Turkey, he fell seriously ill after a plunge into the icy Cydnus River. His condition worsened, and he risked not surviving. His only hope was a dangerous medicinal treatment proposed by Philip, Alexander's physician and childhood friend. Before taking the medicine, a warning reached Alexander, suggesting that Philip had been bribed by the Persians to poison him. Faced with a life-or-death decision, Alexander chose to trust Philip. With the medicine helping him recover, Alexander was soon ready to continue his campaign, overcoming dilemmas and challenges on his path to conquest. Turning tides at Issus. When Alexander the Great encountered King Darius's Persian army, it was the Battle of Issus that would change the course of history. Despite being outnumbered, Alexander's strategic counterattack allowed his forces to push through the Persians, seizing victory and captives. Yet, Alexander showed compassion toward his captured enemies, rejecting a peace treaty to further expand his conquest. At the tender age of 23, Alexander the Great found himself and his army just a small Turkish mountain range away from King Darius's Persian forces. Desiring an open battlefield for his massive cavalry, Darius didn't expect to face Alexander on a narrow stretch near the Panaris River, a location that would host one of history's most remarkable battles. Alexander's forces initially struggled, but a ferocious counterattack by his right wing pierced through the Persian army, enabling him to strike at Darius's rear. With the battle's balance shifting and Alexander attacking across two fronts, the Persian army crumbled, prompting Darius to realize the fight was lost. In a climactic moment, Alexander and Darius locked eyes, as depicted in a mosaic displayed in Pompeii. Surprisingly, Darius's expression showed shock rather than anger. Despite this legendary duel, Darius slipped away, leaving Alexander victorious and in possession of numerous Persian captives, including Darius's mother and son, who feared for their lives. Nonetheless, Alexander treated his captives with dignity, promising to raise the great king's son as his own. Subsequently, Darius extended a peace treaty, offering Alexander all of Asia Minor and a generous ransom for his family's return. Knowing his generals would urge him to take this proposal, Alexander instead altered the treaty to remove concessions and insert insults. His advisors fell for the ruse, so Alexander pressed on unopposed, driven to conquer all of Persia and alter the course of history forever. Alexandria, birth of a legend. After his victory at the Battle of Issus, Alexander the Great made his way to Egypt, where he focused on earning the trust and respect of the local population, who had no love for the Persian rulers. When the time was right, Alexander decided to establish a thriving city to strengthen Greece's connections. Inspired by a dream and unfazed by omens and challenges, he chose the location opposite the island of Pharos and named the city Alexandria. This crucial decision built the foundation of a globally influential city destined to play an essential role in world history. Alexander's journey continued with a perilous trek to an oracle in the Sahara, seeking answers and guidance, ultimately leading to his destiny of changing the course of history. Alexander's masterstroke at Gaugamela. Alexander the Great, after conquering Egypt, faced King Darius's army again near Babylon. Despite being outnumbered and facing intimidating Indian war elephants, Alexander ingeniously devised a plan to create a gap in the Persian formation. Although Darius escaped, Alexander secured a decisive victory, leading to the unopposed inclusion of Babylon into his growing empire. On his journey to Babylon, Alexander encountered King Darius's colossal army. Having crossed the Euphrates and Tigris rivers, Alexander found the Persians, with their fearsome Indian war elephants, on the plain of Gaugamela. Outnumbered yet undeterred, Alexander knew he needed a cunning strategy to outmaneuver the advantage held by Darius's forces. As darkness fell on the eve of the Battle of Gaugamela, Alexander conceived the perfect plan. He would have his cavalry ride parallel to the Persian front line, drawing their troops away from the center and creating a gap which he could charge through head-on. Though risky, Alexander's gamble paid off as he managed to penetrate the heart of the enemy's formation, riding straight toward Darius. However, victory was not yet his. News reached Alexander of Persians breaking his line of defense and attacking his own forces. Darius seized this window of opportunity to escape, prompting Alexander to aid his beleaguered troops and, ultimately, vanquish the remnants of the Persian army. With the battle won, Alexander advanced towards Babylon, an awe-inspiring city with over 300-foot-tall walls and intricate grid system layouts, adorned with countless bronze gates. Upon his arrival, the people of Babylon greeted him with jubilant music, flowers, and gifts, a testament to their delight at being liberated from the oppressive Persian rule. The incorporation of Babylon expanded Alexander's empire across 3 continents and numerous ethnicities, demonstrating the impressive reach of his power and strategic genius. Persepolis, Conquest and Tragedy. Alexander the Great's journey to the Persian capital, Persepolis, was fraught with challenges and surprises, as he faced an ambush by the remaining Persian forces at the Persian gates. Seeking an alternative route, he managed to surprise the Persians and clear the path to the capital. Upon the city's surrender, he couldn't prevent his restless soldiers from pillaging. Alexander's crowning mistake in Persepolis was recklessly burning down the palace while intoxicated, a decision he immediately regretted. As he continued his conquest, Alexander sought to capture Darius, now a prisoner in the hands of the new Persian king, Bessus. However, his quest ended in sorrow as Bessus killed Darius and escaped, leaving Alexander saddened by the loss of his worthy adversary. Pursuit through the Hindu Kush. The news of Darius's death brought joy to Alexander's army, but their battles were far from over as they set their sights on Bessus, the betrayer of Darius. After delivering a motivating speech, Alexander led his troops through the treacherous Hindu Kush mountains in an arduous pursuit of Bessus. Despite the immense challenges of the journey, they successfully captured Bessus in 329 BC, only to find that the traitor believed his actions were justified. Angered by Bessus' response, Alexander ordered his torture and eventual execution. As Darius's death rippled through Alexander's ranks, they breathed a sigh of relief, expecting to return home victorious. But Alexander had different plans. He was determined to seek vengeance on Bessus for his betrayal of Darius. Unable to resist the thrill of expanding his empire, Alexander persuaded his army to venture further east in pursuit of the traitor. Little did they know that the treacherous Hindu Kush mountains awaited them on this journey. Present-day Afghanistan's towering peaks proved to be a grueling undertaking for Alexander's army, as they navigated dizzying heights of 15,000 feet and narrow passages in the dead of winter. Despite these immense challenges, they pressed on, and the unsuspecting Bessus failed to place any defenses to intercept their path. After 5 days of relentless climbing and descending, Alexander's troops entered the land of Bactria. Finally, in the summer of 329 BC, they cornered Bessus, who was swiftly handed over by the villagers. Confronting the traitor, Alexander inquired about his motives for brutally murdering his own king and kindred. To Alexander's shock, Bessus claimed he believed his actions would win the conqueror's favor. Frustrated and angered by Bessus's revelation, Alexander orchestrated a brutal interrogation, inflicting severe punishment on the traitor. Subsequently, Bessus was sent to Darius's family, who carried out his execution as a final act of retribution. Voyage to India and Revelations. Alexander's expedition to India began as a strategic conquest to become the king of the world. Greeted peacefully initially, he later faced opposition from some Indian kingdoms, like King Porus of Pauravas. The loss of his beloved horse, Bucephalus, and the dwindling faith of his army began to weigh on Alexander's ambitions. Struck by the longing of his troops to return home, Alexander finally agreed to disengage and head back to Macedonia after 7 weary years. In 327 BC, after traversing distant lands for 7 years, Alexander the Great continued to be restless. After marrying Roxanne, a nobleman's daughter, he turned his attention to India, planning to become the king of the world upon its conquest. He arrived at Taxila, in modern-day Pakistan, and was initially mistaken by the grand display of men and elephants as an opposing army. King Omphis of Taxila clarified the misunderstanding, explaining that this was their way of welcoming foreign leaders. Not all Indian kingdoms submitted peacefully, however. King Porus of Pauravas prepared to battle Alexander, and it was during this conflict that Alexander's cherished horse, Bucephalus, died. He founded a city named Bucephalus nearby to honor his fallen companion. As the campaign progressed, Alexander faced another challenge. His army's faith in him was wavering. Arriving at the Ganges, his inspirational speeches no longer resonated with the exhausted troops. In a turning point, one general addressed Alexander and his army, stating that they were proud of their accomplishments but longed to return home to their families. His words were met with enthusiastic agreement from the troops. The general then advised Alexander that returning to Macedonia and regrouping with fresh soldiers was the wisest course of action. Swallowing his pride, Alexander mulled it over for several days before ultimately agreeing. And with that, the homesick conqueror prepared to leave India and journey back to his homeland. Alexander's unsatisfied ambitions. After a decade away from Macedonia, Alexander the Great returned home with the largest empire the world had ever seen. Unwilling to rest on his laurels, Alexander sought further expansion, with dreams of conquering the Arabian and North African coastlines and addressing the growing threat of the Romans. However, fate intervened as Alexander was met with dark omens and a dire warning from Chaldean priests. He ultimately suffered sudden illness after a night of intense revelry, leading to his death. His parting words, "To the strongest," sparked a fierce succession struggle. Alexander the Great's seemingly endless thirst for expansion only grew upon returning to Macedonia after overcoming countless obstacles during his journey home. The entirety of the Arabian and North African coastlines tantalized him, promising control of the regions stretching from Egypt to the western Mediterranean. Additionally, Alexander couldn't ignore troubling reports about a problematic tribe known as the Romans. Fate, however, had other plans. Approaching Babylon, Chaldean priests urgently warned Alexander not to enter the city, or at the very least, not to walk towards the setting sun, a symbol of death. Skeptical, Alexander disregarded their caution, but ominous events soon transpired. As he sailed, a gust of wind stole his crown, and upon returning to his palace, an ex-convict audaciously sat on his throne, donning the very crown that once adorned Alexander's head. Disaster struck after a night of excessive drinking. Alexander was stricken with a severe, and ultimately, fatal illness. As his health rapidly deteriorated, Alexander knew he wouldn't see his ambitious plans come to fruition. Upon being asked by his closest companions about the successor to his great empire, Alexander offered cryptic and final words, "To the strongest." This enigmatic statement ignited a fierce battle for power, a struggle that would determine the future of his vast, and rapidly diminishing empire. Alexander's enduring cultural impact. Alexander the Great's extraordinary 10-year campaign left an undeniable mark on Eurasia, shaping the cultural landscapes of regions such as Persia and India even after his empire's collapse. Alexander's influence gave rise to kingdoms blending Greek and Indian traditions, transforming Indian art and architecture, evident in the human-form Buddha statues inspired by Apollo. Despite facing criticism in Persia, Alexander ignited a Greek philosophical tradition that deeply affected the Islamic age and religious thinking. Interestingly, Rome, a place Alexander never visited, also saw a flourishing of his legacy as they adopted Greek language, art, and architecture. The Greek language's prominence in post-Alexander Mediterranean greatly contributed to the widespread adoption of Christianity, to the extent that without him, Christianity might have remained confined to Roman Palestine. Although other conquerors sought to replicate his feats, none could surpass Alexander the Great's vast empire.
As we reach the end of Alexander the Great's illustrious journey, it becomes evident how his relentless ambition, strategic prowess, and the indomitable spirit transformed him into one of the most successful military leaders the world has ever seen. His conquests helped shape Greek, Persian, and Indian cultures and laid the groundwork for the rise of the Roman Empire. While Alexander's quest for world domination was left unfinished due to his untimely death, his impact on history is undeniable. Through Sean Patrick's vivid account, we grasp the depths of Alexander's character, his unparalleled achievements, and the lasting legacy he left in his wake.